Tonight we're using the drums. Tonight we're using the drums. Tonight we are getting into the aspects of the difference between staying in suffering, or the suffering complex based on emotional attachments, the unhealed aspects of ourselves, and coming into that true aspects of doing things without the gratitude, with in true gratitude. If I live in gratitude, I move in gratitude, then I become everything that I do is of gratitude. Gratitude is free of expectancy, all that good stuff. And that's what we're getting into tonight. We are going to be tackling, as you come in, we're going to be tackling bloodlust. All throughout the week, y'all know the lesson that we've been getting into. The family feud, blessings, blessings, blessings. We've been getting into the family feud, karmic debt, soul contract. Everything that's in your space in your current life cycle is based on things that you have not dealt with in past life cycles. The things that are triggering us in this life cycle, the things that we can't seem to get to work, those are things that we've already mastered, and that we've mastered them to a point the way they cannot exist in this space. And then that brought me into the thought process of understanding the resonance of your old emotions, taking up resonance based on acceptance, based on those wounds and the aspects of suffering. Suffering is the accumulation of our emotional attachments. Suffering is based in the aspects of our emotional attachments. Sacrifice is based on acknowledging, accepting, acknowledging, and taking responsibility for those attachments. There's a difference between me suffering and staying in a mindset of suffering, and me coming into a space of understanding the sacrifice is to become the ultimate example. When we take that responsibility for ourselves, we take this responsibility for ourselves and start taking this true responsibility in building that new space, building that new place for ourselves. When you come into your awakened state, you're going to feel this, oh my God, I don't know what to do next. It's a very, and that's what we get into tonight with that bloodlust. When you come into your awakening, when you come into this realization, when you come into this awareness, that energy, that first block of energy that's been stored up that you have not tapped into, that's what a lot of us tap into. I always say that when you come into your first stages of awakening, when you come into those first stages of your awareness, it's a trial period. It's like, remember when y'all were little? Or if I don't know, Monk was that little, remember when that little AOL disc came in the mail and you could get new internet for like a couple of days? That's what it's like when you come into your awareness. It's a 7-day trial period. You feeling good because all of that energy is being released. That was your first sacrifice. Now, what are you aware of? The last couple of weeks, we were talking about what are you aware of? I'm aware, I'm conscious. What are you aware of? What are you being aware of? I'm aware of the injustices. I'm aware of the conflicts. Okay, cool. What do these things mean? What do these aspects mean to you? Not the identity that you took in. Because like last week when I said you kept the old narrative of we've been slaves for 400 plus years, when the title or the definition of black ain't been in existence but for 157 years now. So what are you going to pull from? Sacrifice is removing those set identities in order for you to actually take true responsibility to yourself. So you actually start navigating and moving within yourself and internalizing. It does you no good. It does us no good to stay inside of a position where we're still stuck within that lack mentality, that lack of ownership, that lack mentality. That's what builds our suffering. And that's what we're getting into tonight. Welcome to Friday Night Lectures. Tonight we're getting into that bloodlust. We get into that bloodlust, that feeling that you have to, now that you're aware, you're wanting to put everything in its place. But as I always say, everything's in the position that it need to be in. You're in the position that you need to be in. You're exactly where you need to be right now at this point in time. You're in the right position. Whoa, yeah. You are exactly where you need to be. You are in the exact position of where you need to be. Your space is your initial opportunity. What does your space mean? Remember, everything outside is going to be that projection aspect. What does your space mean to you? Why did you step in that position in the first place? And now that you are acknowledging it, we're going to get different. There's a difference between suffering is based on what? Or the material. The emotional attachments that create that material or of that space. We're reprogramming and rewiring the entire content of our entire mind by owning the entire story of us. Owning this entire story of your mind, who you really are, minus not the identity. You can say you're a good, I can say that I'm good this, but what does good really mean inside with me when there's nothing around me? Remember, we talked about that integrity and that humility is within that dark aspect. It doesn't matter what I do when people are around me, and that used to be based on those acceptances. When we stay in this suffering, when I stayed in this suffering monologue, I suffered based on acceptance. I had to define why I was suffering. It was easy to put myself in a position and be like, I'm suffering because of this. I'm suffering because of this. I'm suffering because my job ain't working out. I'm suffering because my relationships like garbage. My friend was sneaky, this, and this. It was easy to put external blame on things so I can stay in the behavior that served my suffering. It was easy for me to not take the full responsibility to myself and keep myself in that cycle of suffering. I go a whole 30 days, and then at the end of 30 days, I'm back at square one. All because in my mindset, through that lack mentality, through the suffering, through those unhealed aspects that I had not dealt with, I was always in the mindset of, I'm never going back to this. So since I'm never going back to this anchor point, I'm never going back to this again. Everything that I'm going to do is going to help me not get back to this point. But after a while, you really got to think to yourself, is it more of me suffering that keeps me? Is it my suffering that gives me my edge? So if my suffering gives me my edge, that means my suffering gives me my identity. That means I can tell my story through this point of my suffering. So as anybody that buys this point, I can get something from them. But in order for me to remain in that space, craziest part about it is when you think about it, I have to stay in I have to keep something in my life that is in a point of struggle. So those friends that I kept blaming shit on, they're not getting their life together. I keep trying to give them the game. What is the example that they have? A lot of the things break down to you becoming that ultimate example. I can't say something to somebody if I haven't first done it. I can build in that aspect, but then at the end of the day, what am I really doing? I'm selling hope. I'm selling escapism. I'm selling this coping mechanism in order for you to stay comfortable. So you're really not going to commit to a sacrifice. All of this is synonymous to everything that you're doing in that synonymous rhythm. You've already been doing this is when we talk about bringing the unconscious to the conscious. In order to understand the unconscious to the conscious, just like questioning everything, studying all and following none, everything has to be questioned. Everything has to be questioned. You gotta You cannot keep yourself. Yeah. Yes. But the thing when we get into that process, the thing that we get stuck in when we're going through that aspect of suffering is you get to that point when we're thinking about our suffering and we're putting up with these things in our life. How long will I put up with something? And is it based on my emotional, is it based on an attachment or an avoidance? That was the defining point in, am I really like, I know that this is supposed to make me stronger, but at a point in time when we're going into that suffering moment with ourselves, we use that becomes a handicap. It becomes a crutch. As long as I have this, because through that suffering, through that ankle weight, using the example, using that toleration, using that ankle weight, using that aspect to make me stronger, I built an identity that connected to my suffering. So at a point in time, when am I going to let go of this identity and learn the lesson? Because in that aspect of learning my tolerances, I forgot that, this is for a certain period of time. I can't just keep carrying this with me in every part. Eventually, I got to let go of this so I can take on to the next level. This is a lot of times, this is how we get weighted down with ourselves, because we're still carrying on that same aspect, because we got to understand those layers. We got to understand these layers. Your struggle was based on what was unseen. So the longer that the unseen is not, I'm not taking care of this, I'm not dealing with this, I'm not having this conversation with myself, I'm not doing this work with this in this under part that I'm building this strength up to deal with, I can get stuck in a cycle. I get stuck in this cycle of suffering, this cycle of stress, this cycle of anger, this cycle of all of my emotional attachments, because I built things in those spaces. I built an identity to survive in that space. There's a difference between me going through a stressful environment and a struggle when I understand that I'm about to make a sacrifice, because eventually I got to make the sacrifice. I'm doing all of this to get to a point to where when I take this responsibility, I now sacrifice this, put it into the fire, it don't serve me anymore. That's a lot of times where we get stuck in that aspect of that struggle. That's a lot of times we get stuck in that aspect of that identity that was built in that story with ourselves. Because in your struggle, in that suffering, the longer that you remain in that behavior of I have to struggle, the longer that I stay in that mindset that I have to struggle, I gotta struggle. I came from the struggle, so I gotta stay in that. That's what keeps me humble. So if you don't struggle, you're not humble. Humility is an internal energy. That's the bloodlust. That's that lust. So now, if I'm not coming from a space of, if I've not owned that part of my story of where I suffered, where I struggled, where I went through certain aspects of my life, if I can't own that part of my story, that will be the first thing that's always going to come up in my space every time that I do something. That's going to be the first thing that comes up. What you noticing now, especially with this Gemini season, that split the twins that shift is going to be separating you away from the things that were based in the high emotion and the things that are based into your balance. The things that are based into your balance, where you're coming into this new space of yourself, that true aspect of yourself. You're defining that space. The main thing that comes with suffering, the main reason people will stay in a space of suffering is because you are scared. You can be in fear of your own power because you've only seen your power through certain outlets. So you know that you mad strong when you angry. You know that you mad, peace. You know that you mad strong when you angry. You know that you can get a lot of things done whenever you got your back up against the wall. But in order for me to have my back up against a wall, that means I gotta keep a wall up. That means every time that I go into a space, I automatically have a wall in. I gotta have something. I gotta take something into that space with myself. How you say the initial relief you feel is cleaning up within, but don't get it. Yes. Yes. That's the exact point. You're not using these tools to become handicapped in crutches. You're using these things to be like, hold on, wait, I know how to. This is enhancing my jump. This is enhancing my strength. This is enhancing my abundance that I'm tapping into. This is enhancing those aspects of me. I'm not we got to get it. The false mind is that crutch, or that's that false mind aspect. That's the crutch that you use. Your false mind is only built up of every memory. That's that memory aspect that we get stuck in our memories. You get stuck in your thought process. You get stuck in your head. You get stuck in your head. You can get stuck in your head for a couple hours, and that shit lasts for a whole bunch of weeks. All because you got stuck in one thought process in your mind. All because you got stuck in one thought. You allow one thought to take the reins. So now every time you go into a space, that one thought is still in your mind. So since that thought process is still there, it has to feed from somewhere. Where is it feeding from? Is it feeding from a place of sacrifice? Or I know I need to step out of this position. So I need to do what I need to do to step out of this position. Or is it from a place of suffering where I'm saying to myself, yo, I've done it before. I can do it again. That's how I used to maintain my life. This is how I've always done it. Because why? What's your why? Why did you always do that? What was your first example of why you did that? These are the type of things we go through in sessions. What was the first reason of the why that you did that? For me, one of the biggest things for me in those acceptance wounds, those avoidant wounds, and me coming into a space of full gratitude and accepting, because there's a difference between you doing things based in gratitude. There's a difference between you doing things in gratitude. You're doing it from a space of gratitude. And you may be feeding a space of acceptance. This is when you start dialing back what you're doing based on gratitude. Because you were for a lot of us, we were taught and given that narrative of it's the physical aspect before anything else. So the only way to show that I'm gifting someone has to come from some type of physical, that delivering some type of urge. And usually in that space, you're only trying to solidify behavior based on an urge, rather than if I go into a space and I'm honoring my thoughts. So I'm now bringing honor to myself. I'm bringing that sense of honor. We don't get into all of this. That sense of honor. Everything that I do is my integrity. Everything that I do is of gratitude. It doesn't have to be I'm not trying to fit into somebody saying, you can show me gratitude by doing this, or you can show me gratitude by doing this. You got to dial yourself out of that space, because you can get lost suffering trying to provide something that they have not learned into themselves. That's one of the deepest things of the aspects with that. And when you look at, I've been looking at podcasts and YouTube shows all week, just sitting there looking back, and I'm looking at like the different aspects of the different aspects when it comes to the physical, based on gratitude and expectancy, and it's not from a space of acceptance. And I'm looking into the aspects of based in acceptance. Acceptance is based on that aspect of balance. So as long as I go into a space with an undefined emotional channel, that undefined aspect of myself, that's what's going to build my space. that's what I'm going to have to deal with. Use the aspect of grade. We don't use grade school. We don't use the grade school and the numbers into that. But you can get stuck. You can get stuck trying to be like, I'll use the example. I remember when I got my mom, I've told this story before. But every time I tell it, it gets deeper. I remember the first time I bought my mom, I remember I was like, ooh, I'm gonna get my mom a house. I was in the position to get my mother a crib. In the position, got it for her, got her the crib. Okay, cool. She had it for a good year. The second year, I went away, went on my travels, went about my business. And when I came back, my mom didn't know that I got all the paperwork for the house because I bought the house. But I got this paperwork in the house that a mortgage was taken out on the house. And then I was like, why is a mortgage being taken out on the house? Why is there a mortgage being taken out on this house? So I'm like, I hit up my mom. Yo, mom, what's up with this right here? Da da da. I'm getting this paperwork say you took out a loan on the house and da 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 da. She was like, oh, you got that? I was like, yeah, mom, the house is in my name. The house is in my name. I'm going to get all of these corresponding paperwork. And she was like, well, I needed some money. I was like, mom, why did you needed 80 grand for what? She got defensive. The natural aspects of her being in that passive aggressive, she got defensive. I'm sitting here trying to figure out why. Later on, so now she's making these payments. She damn near lose the damn house because she didn't understand. She didn't read the fine print. What ended up happening was she ended up listening to one of my aunts, her sisters, and they told her like, well, it's your house. You can go ahead and get the money out on it and do whatever you need to do. Eventually, the real reason that they were telling her this was the same reason that she always stayed into that space. That same unseen aspect was every time that she had something, my sisters would guilt her into saying, "Ooh, you remember when I did this for you? Remember when I did this for you? So remember when I did this for you and I did this for you." So I'm like, yo, wait. So y'all basically dupe my mom out of this much money, out of all this money. She was in a good space. And I'm sitting here like in a bias factor. But then I had to go back later on into this thought process. Was like, why? I had to find my why. Why did I do it? From a space of gratitude, I did it from a space of gratitude. But in the truth to myself, I was doing it for a point of acceptance. Because if I truly did it in a full aspect of gratitude, I wouldn't have reacted the way that I reacted. I would have taken that understanding. That's so like I'm looking like, wait. So then I went deeper to myself, deeper into this why. I was like, yes. There's never a why to doing it. It's that's and when we're doing this work, when we're doing this healing work, we're answering these whys. We're finding these answers. Remember, closure is a trap. So a lot of times when we ask these answers, it's based on that what, or we're trying to get closure to the sequence, and instead of understanding like, wait, so they did this, so you did it because they said go do it, because they said you can go do it, and they would give you the money back. But here's the thing, I was like, then I asked my mom a simple question. I was like, yo, mom, like, so if they said they were going to give you the money back, but they didn't have the money to begin with, why didn't they use one of their houses? She was like, I didn't think about that. I was like, these are the things that your son thinks about. She was like, and the only thing that she can give me was the blanketed answer that it's family. We got to take care of family. This is before I understood what a soul contract was. This is before I understood what karmic family debt was, ancestral debt was. This is before I understood any of that shit. Before I understood any of that. But in order for me to fully understand karmic debt, the ancestral debt, the realm, going into the higher realms, understanding these higher aspects, becoming aware of the higher aptitudes of myself, those were the lessons that I had to learn from. Those were my lessons. So a lot of times when we go into those spaces with ourselves, we avoid the lessons that are right there, looking for the projection or something that's external to set that tone. So I sat there with it. I was like, all right, cool. I'm never doing this again. I'm never doing this again. In that same space, here's the other part of that polarity, though. That was only one side of that polarity, or one side of that stream. The other side of the stream was the true intent by why I did it and how I acquired this money. How I acquired it, how I got it, the mindset I was in. That mindset had to be maintained. So naturally, since I went into this mindset with a struggle mindset, the hustler mindset, then of course, what's going to happen on the other end? What's going to happen on the other end? The reflections or the inverted aspect of my decision. The same reason that could happen is because of the reason of what I took into that space. So it would continue. This is a lot of time where we get into these urges and we get into this bloodlust and we getting angry and you getting mad and you getting upset. You start to get unfocused because you stop looking at that why that came into play, why that came into position. Why does this keep happening? Why do I keep having the same reflective aspects? Why I keep getting the same? Why every time I get to a certain point in my life, the same things come up? Because it's coming from your unseen. Your world is not built on what is seen. It's built on what is unseen. That's what fuels everything in that space. Mm-hmm. No good. Yes. That sounds like perfect with that. Like you're putting yourself into this space. Why are you doing it? What is your true intent? This is when you're being honest with yourself. Are you doing it based on emotional attachment? Okay, cool. You have to acknowledge this emotional attachment. I don't want this to be I don't want to see this happen anymore. Okay, cool. Now that I have this starting point, now how do I ensure that this doesn't happen anymore? I have to be at a certain point in time, and you taking that responsibility, you got to make that sacrifice to become the example. In the external narrative that has been painted for us, the family narrative, we were also given the narrative. Y'all remember in the early 2000s, every time they talked about the 2000 when they did the Illuminati really, really strong, and they were talking about motherfuckers making sacrifices in the music business, and they sacrificed their mothers and their fathers and their best friends and shit to get their fame and all of that good stuff. And they tried to make it look really, really bad and all that shit. And you were sitting there like, man, I would never do that for that. You doing it anyway. You doing it anyway. What they gave you was the watered down version, but you do that anyway. Mm-hmm. You're not doing these things to be you. We have to remove ourselves from the space of being accepted. Yeah. You're going to a space to where you're not doing it based on being accepted. You're doing it from a true space of your true humility to yourself. Because if I go into a space and I'm doing it based on the acceptance, my wounds, the things that I have not dealt with, those things must maintain in play. And then I just carry on the karmic debt. It don't matter how many millions you make. And you've seen that with multiple motherfuckers go up and go down, lose millions of dollars and all this shit. It don't matter how much money you make, as long as you got some shit in your closet, that's what can be used against you. If you haven't learned one lesson, you are that. Yeah, you are that. That's what you are. If you haven't learned one thing from most of them, like R. Kelly's and Bill Cosby's and everybody else, if you got some shit in your closet and you ain't dealt with it, you can't own that part of your story. It's going to be used at a point in time against you. Most of the times we tell that part of the story and we haven't dealt with that story. Remember, we talked about that difference between emotional, the dismissing and actual truly submitting, and that owning your story. How much of your story can you tell? And you can tell that same story. You don't have to augment it. You ain't got to change it. And a lot of times you can't tell your full story because it's still feeding from an aspect of pain. You're still pulling from pain when you tell your part of your story. If I tell this story I can tell this story to them because they represent this. I can tell this story to them because it represents this. But here's the cycle. Here's that cycle in that family, in that karmic debt. If I can't tell my story, then eventually I'm going to tell my story through another way. I'm going to use an external catalyst. I talked about that thing with the birds and the bees, financial literacy, everything that builds on top of your emotional literacy. So you can't tell the story about the birds and the bees if you still mad at 6 of your exes and you mad at 6 of your exes. Woo! Yeah. Put yourself in that thought process. Imagine if you told your story without bias. That means you were you took responsibility for what you did in your part of the story. Why you were in that space. Because that's what your inner child ultimately wants. Your inner child ultimately wants, because they're gonna keep pulling from your inner child. Hey, go draw this damn picture of this family and now you're still trying to create something in a space that it is based on that suffering. I'm building. If I build my foundation off of the suffering, I remove the headstones and I build my space off suffering, then my space is maintained based off suffering. That means when things come into my space, they gotta be down here and I'm up here with my shit. Like, yeah, I just bought this 300-inch projection on my wall just so when I wake up, my curtains open up like this. But now you got people around you that have never seen some shit like that, and it's based in that acceptance or that neglect wound. And now they see this and they're like, oh my God, yeah, you doing your thing. So now you maintain like, yeah, because I do this and I do this and I do this and I keep this going on and I do this. And you got to do. Now you telling your story with you got props for your story. But if them props ain't there, what does your story? Can you still tell your story? Can you still be in that position? Can you build your foundation without using the external shit to keep you staying relevant? You're gonna become unseen. Motherfuckers are not mad at people who only get mad at you. People's true anger in you and not liking you and saying that you changed and saying that you're not, it's because the imagery in their mind of what they took into that space, you no longer fit that narrative. Yes. Yeah, that's exactly how I said it. Your generational wealth, the generational trauma, the generational curses, all of that comes from emotional literacy. If I don't understand the emotional conduits and the behaviors, then I can't change the narrative of I can't acknowledge the curses. I can't acknowledge wealth. I can't remove the traumas. because I'm not getting to the behavior aspect. That behavior has to be understood. You built a behavior around your trauma. You built reactions. The behavior is the reaction around your trauma. So now that state of you suffering, using that as your weight, that weight became a crutch. So now without this weight, what are you? That weight became your identity. So without this weight, what are you? How can your manifestations go straight down to that weight? It goes to the heaviest point. It goes to the most unseen point. If I'm stuck in a space where I go through 30 days, and at the end of 30 days, I'm in the same position I was when I was in the first day, and I do that 30, all of a sudden I'm at 52, my 52 weeks, and then I go into my next year, I'm doing the same thing. Am I moving things around, or am I actually sacrificing some shit? That was the question that I really had to ask myself. I've never been in a greater position. I've never been that integrity with yourself to be able to, and it stops you from always trying to find an answer. You'll take things in and you're like, oh shit, let me sit here with that. Let me take that feeling or that thought in. Let me sit with that. Let me sit with this. Let me reflect on this. I have time where I'm going to reflect on this. Let me reflect on this. Let me not avoid what was said. Let me acknowledge what was said. Let me listen to, let me really let that seep in and see how that actually works that way. Let me see how that actually looks that way. Let me understand this. Let me really sit with it instead of me immediately looking for an immediate response. Instead of me getting stuck within that narrative of no, and trying to be, I'm not thinking about being right. I'm not thinking about being wrong. I'm not thinking about losing. I'm not thinking about winning. Exactly. Like everything down here is going to be based off what I can, like when you get stuck in this aspect with yourself, you're basically you have to create when we're in a space where we have no drama, no conflict, and I'm actually at a point of peace. I don't know what peace look like because I ain't defined peace inside of myself. Then of course, the distractions become very, very prevalent. You look for the distraction. You put yourself in spaces where you're vicariously living through others that are not in peace because you need something to reflect to keep that identity intact. I'm at peace. We just did Fortnite last night. That shit was great. Y'all also need to go watch the movie Turn It, that inversion movie. That shit was great. Coming from a space like I did all of my works, did everything, set everything up, set up appointments, did all my shit. Yeah. You sitting there literally, beautiful reference. You in GTA and you worried about you're in that RPG with yourself and you worried about the outfit that you get to go buy. You worried about the outfit you get to go buy. You worried about how much life you got. You worried about the life. You worried about shortcuts and secret points to try to get to something, but you're not getting up what you really need to get up. That's on that level and that down low. Like you're putting yourself in a position. What is the position? You're always in the right position. What are you doing with that position? What are you learning in that position? What are you learning in that position? You're not learning anything if you're not learning anything inside of that position if it gives you the same feeling when you went into it, or something even worse, even better. It made you feel good. A lot of times we have this urge, the urge to survive. So we want to feel good inside of that space. So this is when we take that resonance into those, when we talk about these acceptance wounds, the neglect wounds, those childhood wounds, you're still acting from these wounds, these aspects of these wounds. Because without that wound, now what are you? Without the struggle, what are you? You can say all day that, yeah, we came from kings and queens and this, and this, but what were you? What were you? Because you never stopped being a king, you never stopped being a queen, you never stopped being an alchemist, you never stopped being any of these things. You never stopped being an astronomer, you never stopped being any of these things. But what you became as a king, as a queen, as these aspects, when you talk about your royal lineage, you took over, because a king and a queen there to a king and a queen are to survey whatever the gods create, or whatever the titans spit out, or whatever the ancient ones prophesize. So now that you're in your new space and you're still royalty, you're a king and a queen. Now you're a king and a queen. You are surveying everything that's in your space. What are you a king and queen of? Are you a king and a queen of your emotional attachments? You're the king of toxic, the queen of toxic. So now you got that narrative and that identity staying within that space. I'm the king of hustle. I'm the queen of hustle. All right, cool. So what is your hustle about to lead to? What can you teach somebody about that? And then it's not about staying in that position. Yes. What is your, like, the point of me being the shaman and the healer is that's the base. That's what I am in this physical aptitude. So counseling, therapy, readings, spell work, all of that shit. That's what I do down here in this space. But that's not that's a part of the grander scheme of what I am. That's a part that feeds. That's where my integrity, my humility, that's where all of those spaces are. I'm free of the identity, because that is what I am. But everything that I'm doing with that is to build something up. I'm constantly building in a higher aspect. I'm not doing this because this is what happens in that narrative when you get stuck in the guilt, the insecurity, the identities that you're trying to maintain. What happens when you're no longer that identity? What happens when you're no longer the brother in that aspect? What happens when you're no longer a brother or a sister? What happens when you're no longer a mom or a dad? What happens when you're no longer an aunt, an uncle? What happens when you're no longer based in the identity? What are you? Your integrity reflects through that. He wasn't. Yeah. King and the Queen was actually the King and the Queens. They were more like this, the figurehead. So you can stay hidden. You trying to be something so bad that identity, Nick, is best. You trying to stay in the light too much. Ooh, I'm gonna stay. Nah, I like playing the background. I like playing the background, coming out when I need to, come out when I need to, and go back in when I need to. I don't feel that need to be. Ooh, they got to see me every single. No. Where did that come from? Who taught you that? A lot of the times when we get in these spaces with ourselves, there's a difference between that, the trying to cement your behavior into connecting to that debt and keeping that debt intact, and then you coming into this space of true gratitude, and you're in gratitude about everything. I can look at my mom I remember having a conversation with my mother in her face, my mother and my pops standing in their kitchen. I made them some bomb ass macaroni, made them some bomb ass dinner that night. And I remember sitting in that space, and I literally said, I can thank you for everything that you show me. Everything that you've done, I thank you for. Everything. When I went into a deep I was like, that's the things that you did and instilled as in the learning lessons. I'm talking about everything. I'm talking about the things that I did not agree with at that point in time with myself, that I did not agree with, or the things that you did based on where you were at and why you did those certain things. I'm in gratitude of all that shit. I'm in gratitude of all that. You got to get to that point, because until you get to that point, it's always going to be from a state of avoidance. Mm-hmm. You put yourself in that space. Like, can you have that conversation yet? That's that. Yeah. Like you got. I mean, can you have that conversation yet? That's a part of your work. That's a part of you getting in depth with yourself. Can you have that conversation yet? If you can't have that conversation with them, that means you damn sure. Until I had that conversation with myself, really, I damn near couldn't have that conversation with them, and invite in that same space to take myself out of that ring, keep myself out of that constriction. So now everything that I did was no longer based on guilt. It was no longer everything that I do now is no longer based on guilt. I don't feel like I gotta go. There's not that feeling of like maybe I need to make that phone call or maybe I need to do this or it's coming from somewhere. Because 9 times out of 10, all I do is thinking and it comes through the space. It's doing the same thing. 9 times out of 10, they're doing the same thing. The only thing that changes, the only thing that ever changed when they were doing the same thing is when I involved myself into it. That part of when I was looking at it, that's the only time that it actually changed. And I felt some type of way. Mom, I told you over and over and over again, you got to do this, this, and this. But until I became the example, I can't have that conversation in real life. That conversation is everything. That conversation you have with your inner child is everything. That's why I posted that question. When are you going to reconcile with your inner child? When you go and sit down with your inner child and sit there and play and do some coloring. When you going to sit down with your inner child and you going to play a video game with them. When you going to sit down with your inner child and watch some cartoons all day. And then you going to journal before you go to bed. When you going to have that conversation with your inner child. Your inner child suffers. Your inner child is what's in suffering. Your inner child is what you blame. No, nobody, but your inner. You're speaking from your inner child. Your inner child has to wear a mask that it don't fit. Use this visualization. Y'all remember those masks when you were little? I don't know how many people remember that mask when you were little. You remember that mask that you got from the store and it had that little itty bitty slit and that was your Halloween costume? That's what you're doing to your inner child. You got your inner child in a hot vinyl suit trying to maintain all of these identities, wearing all these little masks with a little slit in it where it can't breathe. So now you suffocating yourself. And then you replicate or it ripple effects into your life to where else you feel suffocated at. So the conversation you aren't having with your inner child talking about they hot and you like, nah, I'm not listening to that. We got to keep going through this because we got to get to a certain point. And you put yourself into that space. I remember keeping myself in that space. Not dealing with the trauma, not dealing with the event. And then it became similar to like grade school. And this is where we're going to break down that the grade school aspect. In kindergarten, in first grade, you learn basic aspects of yourself. You learn your path. That was the beginning of your path. Life path 1. You learn the beginning of your path. You learn the beginning. You learn everything that connects to that. That's why you learn sinners and all that good shit. So by the second and third grade, those are your aspects of creating your first. That was the first identity that you created. Through the third grade. October used to be super hot. You sitting there like, nigga, why am I so fucking... I don't want to go get candy no more. This is too hot. But now, by the time you get to the 7th grade, and if you look at numerology, you understand the number 7 and the aspects of what the number 7 means, then you'll see the synonymous rhythm of the karmic debt of your soul contract. There's one interpretation that I pull out and I'm like, nigga, I can use that as that. Because everything after 9 repeats itself. It goes back to 1, 2, and 3. That's why after the 9th grade was the end of the cycle of when they were like, okay, cool, now you're adult, you can drive, all of these aspects into that space. So now you can drive, i.e. now you must take ownership of your emotions in order for you to drive and to focus. And then 10th grade, 1 went all the way back to life path 1. 11th grade, sometimes you flourished in the 11th grade, that's life path 2. And then in the 12th grade or 3, that was your life path 3, or that number, or that combination of numbers. And then when you turn 8, I was 17 when I graduated, when I got out of school. But when you turn 18, in that sense of this, to keep that flow, 18, 1 plus 9, end of a cycle. So it was the end of cycles. But you didn't learn any, since you were put into a space. Since you were put into a space and you just kept carrying things forward because you didn't understand. Since I didn't understand what I was carrying forward, I'm just carrying it on, paying it forward. By the time, so now the same reflections of high school years, middle school years, elementary school years. I remember working in my restaurants. I remember working in my jobs, and I was like, these niggas is high school kids. Everybody act like they in high school still. Everybody's still doing this shit based in high school. Everybody wanted to do the same shit they were doing. Everybody wants to do the things that they did not do at a certain point in time. So their possession, or that entity that captures them, is like, ooh, because I want to be accepted because I didn't get to do this when I was in high school. I didn't get to do this when I was in middle school. This happened to me in my life. This was my turning point. I had to do this when I came into this point. And then your ass went crazy. But it all led back to the developmental process that you had to go through. Remember how I talk about how you get stuck within the age of when the trauma or the event happened. So if you were like everything from becoming a parent early to the moment in time when your mom left or your dad wasn't there, that moment that no one knew how to deal with in that point, that's where you're pulling your energy from. I remember I looked back at earlier relationships and looked at my arguments. I argued like a 13-year-old. And I had to accept that I had arguments based on me being like a 13-year-old. Because I remember the first argument that I had in one was when I was 13. So guess what? My development of how I argued, how I said, shutting down, all of these things, all of these suffering aspects, emotional attachments, that were the weights that I was using, that I was not ready to let go of. Because when you come into this space, it's time to let go. It's you letting go of childish things. So you can't use the childlike mindset to tap into your innocence. Everything in your space that you take into that space is something you're going to have to deal with. You don't deal with it, it's just going to cycle back around to something else. It's just going to keep, because everything naturally in that gravitational goes down and it becomes a behavior. So you don't deal with it. So the things that your mom and dad didn't deal with and your mother, father figures didn't deal with in their life, in their cycle, and the things that you didn't deal with in that last period cycle, that's the shit that became a behavior in this current cycle. That's your trigger. That's a behavior. It became a behavior that until you check it, you're going to keep doing it. You're going to be like, nigga, I've been doing this my entire life. I ain't never seen nothing wrong with it yet. But in the back of your mind, in truth, you're like, I just wish I had one time to get something better in my life. I just want to get something better going on in my life. Why can't I seem to get this? Why can't I seem to do that? Yeah. Because you weren't looking at it that way. You're like, man, nah, I'm not. It's okay. You were in the bag of your avoidant wound. You were using that bag of that avoidant wound. A lot of the things that we were, I'm using it from our aspect. What you're grown. When you get grown, you'll understand. When you get 18, you got two rules. You got two choices. All of these narratives that you were told. When I get old, when I'm doing all this so that I'm doing everything I did. I want you to remember everything that I did for you and then you carry that on into your life based on the unseen expectancy. So as much as you learn gratitude and you're trying to be grateful and you're trying to do it to that space, remember there's that difference. Because when you're in true gratitude, like you do it. If they don't accept it, you know to step away. They're not ready for that. They got some shit they got to deal with. They're only projecting back on me. That's if you know you're doing shit from straight gratitude. But you could have did this and you could have did this and you should have did. I'm honoring you from the love that's within me. I'm honoring you with the love I'm honoring you from the love that I've learned from myself. I'm giving you this gift from an aspect of myself, from me, in truth, of me. If you don't accept it, why don't you accept it? That's a question that a lot of times I did not want to answer to myself. That was a big why. If somebody did some shit to me, did some shit for me, and it was out of their graces of themselves, and I really didn't like it or whatever it was, the thing that I was in fear of, like, if I do not say that I don't like this, then they're going to be like, I ain't never doing that shit for your ass again. But if I did it from true gratitude and I expressed like, yo, this is how I show my gratitude, and then you have that conversation, it's all about that conversation. It's always going to go back to the conversation. What conversation are you having inside of that space? What conversation are you having? Are you doing the things based on the avoidance factor? Are you doing the things based on this is what I'm used to doing? This is what I'm used to doing. This is who I am. This is what you got to get used to it or not. That is a dead conversation. It no longer works. We have came to a point to where that exposes most of your wounds. Saying this is the way that you are. You got to accept me. Have you accepted it inside of yourself? In truth, all the way down, have you accepted it inside of yourself? Or is it from a point of avoidance? So now, excellent, you brought it up. So now, if I go back to that event and I can create that scenario inside of my mind, all the information that I've learned, if I go back and I say, yo, I'm going to buy my mom's a house, I'm going to buy the house through my company. I'm going to buy the house through my company. That way, every payment that has to be made on that house or everything that got to be done to that house, guess what? I can write it off on my taxes. There is no loss in that physical aspect. That is now the new boundary that I put in space. That is the representation of it. It's not based on that. It's not based on that, but I've taken away the chance. I've taken away to be blind to what is truly there. I see it for what it is. I know it for what it is. I cannot change it for what it is. I can't change what it is until it accepts that change into itself. When it's ready to invest into those changes, I'll show up. Until then, here is the stream that it's going to go through. Here's the stream that you gotta go through this stream. That's the ownership process. When you can set yourself into that position, instead of you sitting there, because I remember I would run myself ragged. I remember running myself ragged as hell. Putting my energy into a space or lowering myself down to a frequency of worry and guilt and doubt. And that's when all that shit would attach to me inside of that space. So now if I'm sitting here worried, so if I have a thought process where I'm worried about my mother, worried about my mom's, worried about family, worried about somebody, the only reason I was worried in the first place is because of shit that I have not dealt with inside of myself. That's 9 times 10 why you worry. There's something that you ain't dealt with yet. That's where your worry comes from. That's where your stress comes from. It's all about that story it's all about your story being augmented. I sleep great. I sleep excellently. I sleep excellent. I'm at a point now and you get to this point now with when your auric field, when you online, when you fully online, that you don't even have to acknowledge things anymore. It's naturally acknowledged by your protection system. When you take it in that serious, that's your protection system. I know for me, I don't like unnecessary. I don't like things that are unnecessary to that loudness as the loudness devices. You feel me? I don't like that. It irritates the spirit. It irritates the energy. It irritates trains of thought because it's a frequency that's not. I'm not on that frequency, so I know when I go into a space and the frequency doesn't match me, it irritates me. So now in my mind is like when I go into the space, I know what this is. So now I can address it. Mm-hmm. Daddy, my mother's good. My mother's good. My mother has lesson plans. She has her lessons. She has the things that she has to learn. She has the things that she has to. I'm the mother now. I'm the mother aspect now. So when my mother comes to me, I've built that example. So now in the craziest part about it is when you come into that full circle effect, I became that example doing this healing work, doing my internal work. Now when my mom comes to me, the space has changed. Now I can tell my mother this, and this. Mom, have you ever thought about this, or this meditation, sound therapy? I can give her examples because I've done the work. You'll stay in this suffering narrative mainly because you haven't really done the work. You haven't created that space within inside of yourself. You still got that conflict going on inside right here. The conflict is gone. The conflict is where? Touch. The internal conflict is not there. So now I can see now I can see through my eyes without being the conspiracy theorist and trying to make everybody see what I see. Mm-hmm. Now I'm like, that's that now. Now when I go into this space, I can have a different conversation. The conversation is different. The conversation is not based on me trying to maintain an identity, because naturally inside of that space, whether I go to my mom tomorrow, if I would talk to my mom tomorrow, see my mom today, whatever day, my mom's still going to see me. My mom's still going to my mom's always going to be that anchoring point to something about myself. My mother will always see me as the 10-year-old that she taught how to cook breakfast for the first time. She's always going to see me as the 16-year-old that when I first got my license, I took my mom to go eat. She has those memories in her mind that are based on her behaviors. So that's how she's going to see me. That's how my mother's going to see me. I see my mother in a different light. It doesn't denounce what my mother did for me. This is the aspect of that conversation. It doesn't denounce what my mother did for me in the things that she didn't do or I felt that she should have did. I'm in a space now where I'm in gratitude for everything that she did. She did what she did based on where she was at. My pops did what he did based on where he was at. My pops still got the wounds of his grandmother doing him dirty, doing him wrong in his eyes. So he still carries that on. That's his ankle weight. That's his weight. That's the weight that he's gonna carry. I'm light. I'm seamless with it. I'm dipping. I'm in my full ability. So now everything that I do is based on that aspect. When you get to that point with yourself, you're going to be based on that aspect. You ain't going to look the same. You're not going to look the same to them. The reason you're not looking the same to them because it was based on the relevance, based on the trauma. You deal with your issues. It's not based on you dealing with your issues naturally opens up the gate of that emotional. It opens up that emotional gate. That's why when you start doing your healing work, when you really start awakening and you're doing your internal work, and then you going around family members and they still doing the same thing. They still gossip every Sunday, still gossip every Thursday. They still on the bottle. They still smoking. They still doing all these things. Now guess what you get to become? You become the villain. You become the villain. I just had a whole conversation. I had a conversation earlier today and had a whole spiritual conversation today, and they think that I'm bad and they think that I'm this. I'm like, they're going to think that based on projecting onto you. The things that they have not accepted into themselves, what you really need to look at into that space is have you accepted things about you? Wait, so how detrimental would it be to see yourself as a 10-year-old just to cater to her emotions when you have done the work and changed the behavior in order to know better? Yeah, you don't go backwards. My mother seeing me at 10. My mother seeing me at 10. From that point, me submitting my body of light to that space is looking at when I was 10, the lessons that I learned when I was 10. That would be the foundation inside of that space. So now the way that I can connect to that space is my mother's going to look at the lessons that she taught me when she was 10 and looking at the lessons that I learn now. And I had a conversation with my mother about that. And she was like, I remember when you, like, me and my mother having a whole healing session with her. Having my mom's second healing session with me. We having a whole conversation. And we having that whole conversation. And she was like, I remember when you were 10. I remember when you were 5 and I could not get you to study. I remember when you were 10 and you were so excited to do this. What the spirit was leading, or my mother, it don't matter if my mother understand it or not. But for me to understand in that space, I was like, the energy, the energy or that inner light that was inside of me at that point in time, that's what she's acknowledging at that point. That inner light was always present. And that was a moment where she saw or she embraced onto that light. This is why when we go into these spaces and you start doing your shit and we can get stuck on that. Mm-hmm. And for you, that's the lesson. That's the key to your lessons. So like I'm looking at my mom. I'm gonna get to that. My mom saw that light in me at that point in time. They're going to see a light within you, but naturally, because they're still stuck within needing that external narrative to fit their space, they're going to try to project. They're still going to try to use those old projections onto you, but don't look at it from this space. Don't look at it from a space like, oh my God, you still see me this way. I'm not that way. I've came so far. Because you're going to over-explain yourself. Look at it change the perspective. If someone looks at me and they say, I see you still, someone can look at me and be like, I still see you from this point. I'll be like, okay, I take it in. That's not, I can explain, not over-explaining based on the obsession to be accepted, but it actually to paint the stage of my authenticity inside of that space. What did I do? How did I heal? What did I learn? Because now I'm an example in that space. No. If they're not meant to, they're not meant to. That's the thing, one of the hardest factors that activates our bloodlust is when we start to awaken, when we start to come into our own, when we start coming into our authenticity, that hard part is letting go or allowing the natural separation to happen. Allowing that natural separation to happen. If they're not ready for it, they're not ready for it. If they're not meant to go onto that trip, they're not meant to go on that trip. I can't force somebody to go on this trip with me. I can't force somebody. Baba did Gregory said there's 3 rules with these glasses. You can't take them off. You no longer see things as what they are, but you don't see them as what they were. You see them as what they are, and you cannot force anybody to see what you can't force nobody to put them glasses on. They got their path, they got their reason. And this, when we get into those aspects, some people are gatekeepers. You got gatekeepers. You have gatekeepers. You got people that are actually put into your space to deflect you. You got deflectors in your space that are meant to deflect you and keep you off of your path. They're gonna feed you and make you feel really, really good about yourself. But when it comes time to you getting on your work, and they gonna feed on those attachments. And then by the time you get to a certain point, you'll be like, what it really was an aspect of yourself that was accepted in that space. Your inner child loved that space for a certain point in time, and you sat there like, yo, I got something from that space. That's what you took your emotions took residence there. So now that you're coming into this new space, remember, this is what I tell everybody about relationships, friendships, your job, everything that you in. At a point in time, it's going to become so constricted, so convoluted that it's going to force you into the space that you need to be into. You're going to be forced into the position that you need to get into. Yeah. Don't do that. You can get stuck because that's where, think about it. The title is what defines the energy inside of that space. It's the title that you put into that space. You stuck on employee of the month. So they made me the employee of the month 6 months in a row. But eventually, they made you employee of the month. No one else in there doing any fucking work. You don't understand how bad for me. I remember being at my job, and it got to a point, I was feeding off my own acceptance wound. They need me. They need me to be there. I remember being at my job for 40 plus hours a week. And I realized that it wasn't me because that became my narrative in everything else that I was doing. If I could say this, well, they need me here. There was the same narrative of they need me over here so I can do this over there. But the moment that I didn't have it over here and then it fell out over there, then I get mad. But see, that's why we fucking with these niggas. They always want something from you. No. I had to accept that I created these motherfuckers. I created these conduits. I co-created these niggas in my space just so I can remain a certain way. So I can behave a certain way. Because when I was up there making that money, when I was up there doing that thing, doing that shake, doing that thing, making that shit dance, them motherfuckers were around me. But here's the key. Now, every time that I'm down, ain't no one around me. I've said this before. By you sitting here saying to yourself, by avoiding the wound that you need to deal with, you will put yourself into a mindset of, I don't want to see nobody else go through what I went through. Not understanding that they're only a projection of what you went through. They have their own lines that they got to go through. So if every time I'm there to enable them, because they enable me to keep my behavior, so I'm going to enable them to keep balance. It's balance. That's how you keep balance. Everything down here has to stay in balance. When you don't know the rules, you don't know what you're doing. You don't know how to play. Everything down here got to stay in balance. So if I'm in a space with myself to where I got to stay in a certain position of keeping my behaviors intact, that means everything outside of me got to maintain those behaviors for me. So if I'm avoiding, my initial conversation is based on avoidance, then every conversation I'm going to have is based on avoidance. The cognitive bias of avoidance. If I'm neglecting myself in some way, shape, or form, everything in my space at a point in time to keep me in balance, to maintain that behavior, guess what I got to do? It got to keep me in a state. It got to be in a state of neglect. That's how I maintain that space. That's how I maintain that identity. Once I challenge that identity for what it is, see it for what it is, see it for what wound it is, see it for what I got to deal with it. Once I deal with that, I change the entire board. Because now I'm not going into spaces based on avoidance. So now when I go into the space, my conversation is different. But not only is my conversation there to keep me in balance, now I'm able to respond and listen more. I'm not looking for the right or wrong. I'm not looking to be able to react. I'm not looking to be able to say something real slick. I'm not using my trickster ways. I'm not using my trickster elements as Lucifer. My trickster elements that have always been prevalent. I'm not using my trickster elements that are in the Pan archetype of energy, the Dionys archetype of energy, all of these. I'm not using the lower aspects of myself anymore. Therefore, I'm not now I can see the mask that I put up, that I accepted in that space. I put on a mask, go into that space. Now I don't have to use that mask anymore. So now I look like, so now motherfuckers say, nigga, you worship the devil. Nigga, I am Lucifer. I don't have to worship nothing. You're changing your dynamic. You're not doing any of this to stay relevant. You're doing all this to become the highest and the best version of yourself. When you really start tapping into the highest and best version of yourself, the natural separation of everything that was based on an emotional attachment is going to light up. So that conversation, similar to the conversation, I still see you as when you were broken. I remember when you were like this. And then that's based in the actual possession. Got another story. I remember being at my mother's house. Grandma speaking to me hard. I remember being at my mother's house one day, and I remember, and I can guarantee y'all have heard this conversation in your lives. If you haven't, you probably were the one that had that. You're probably the one that said it. I remember being at my mother's house. Me and my mother were just getting back on, like we were just getting back into that healed space, having those conversations. And I remember my sister and her baby father, boyfriend, husband, whatever the fuck the nigga is, came through. And I remember for about 45 minutes straight, this nigga was going down the list of things that he did and my sister would not be able to do without him. You remember when you had the locks? I put the locks in your hair. I did this and I did this and I did this. And I'm sitting there, I'm looking at my sister, and it was like the trippy. I'm like, I'm watching her inner child. I'm watching my sister go from the bright light that was in the space to that dimness of that inner child. Those aspects of the inner child of school and I'm seeing all of these moments come up in the space. And then I remember my pops came back in the room, and then I was like, that's what my pops used to do to my mother. That's what my pops used to do to my mother. All the time. They said this shit over and over and over again. Whether he was knowing he was doing it or not doing it didn't matter, but that was what he kept doing to my mother. The same speech. So I'm looking at the generational trauma, the generational curse passed on. I remember later on, I had a conversation with my sister later on, and I remember like, damn, how many times have I heard this conversation in my life and I thought that shit was normal? This is some of that shit that we think, this is some of the shit that we thought was fucking normal. How many times, if you even remember it, go back to that point, grandfather, your mother, all those aspects, your mother's boyfriends, your father's girlfriends, all of these aspects in these conversations that you heard that you didn't think nothing about at the point in time, but they inlined into your subconscious. And now you find yourself unconsciously, because you unconsciously took it in, so when it consciously comes out, and you find yourself saying those things or speaking from that space or saying something in the similar of that space. Just that urge. You have this urge just to say it. You don't know where it came from. That's the underline. That's the framework that got you locked in with. That's that framework. Before, if we don't deal with that frame, if I didn't deal with that framework, nothing else would have fucking mattered. Because I remember earlier on in relation, I remember I would say that shit all the time. I would do that shit all the time. From a passive aggressive standpoint, I learned passive aggression from my mother. So I would say that shit on a passive aggressive tense. I wouldn't say shit now unless I was angry. I wouldn't say shit unless I was upset. I wouldn't say shit now unless I was feeling some type of way, just to maintain a behavior. So what I was mad, so that way I could recall back, I was just angry, repeating the same traumatic responses of my parents, of my of the ones before me, repeating the same shit. Why? Because I felt that's what I needed to do. So I sustained the space. So I was only maintaining the space. The bare necessities inside of that space, of that mindset, that's how you would speak. That's how you going to talk. That's how you going to act. It's the unseen that builds your space. It's the undealt with that builds your space. It's the unhealed aspects that build your space. You will sell your trauma before you sell that you're healed. You will sell your trauma before you sell that you're healed. Because being healed makes you now what? See, it's easy to sell trauma because you can build on trauma because everything outside of you is built on the behavior based on trauma. But if you sit there and say, nigga, I'm healed, I'm at peace, I will okay you to death. Okay. Yep. Mm-hmm. Sure. Yep. Uh-huh. And I might make it spicy and be like, so how long have you felt this way? I'll psychoanalyze your ass to death. So I'm either going to okay you to death or I'm going to psychoanalyze it. You're not going to get a reaction out of me. If you get a reaction out of me, I'm immediately going to, if you get a reaction out of me, I'm immediately going to reject. I'm immediately going to eject and go check myself. I'm going to go check myself. If I got to go for a walk, by myself, the kids, by myself. If I got to go for a walk, if I got to go sit down to myself, I'm going to go take that time to myself. And I'm going to reflect. How the hell did how did that shit get to me? What is this really about for me? Before I even assess anything else, what is this truly about? I'm going to find the answer within myself first. That way, when I come back to the space, I'm like, so I have an idea, but I'm not trying to use that as the reason to keep the space going. There's a difference between deflecting and reflecting. So now when I go into the space, it's based on reflecting and I'm not deflecting. See, when you get stuck in that deflection narrative, a lot of us get stuck into that deflection narrative with ourselves. So it's like we're constantly pushing things away. No, that's not it. No, that's not it. No, that's not it. No, that's not it. Oh, that's it. I'm going to take that. I'm going to take those words. I'm going to use them words. Mm-hmm. Yes. And that's the main aspect. You done had all the lessons with you. But you sitting in that space with yourself like, You want to denounce some things because it's easy. Here's the key why it's so easy. This is what I was waiting for. This is the point why it's so easy for when motherfuckers become conscious, the first thing that they want to get rid of is Jesus. And they'll say, fuck Jesus. I know because I said it. Oh, like, fuck Jesus. Jesus ain't real. But why was that nigga so prevalent in my life? Why was that aspect so prevalent in my life? And why the hell did every time something came up, that would be the first thing I would say about, that's the only thing I can say about my consciousness because I don't believe in Jesus. Bobby Emmett broke that shit down the best. Go back, look at it. I got to look up that lecture. But he said, you can use Mickey Mouse in the same way that niggas use Jesus. Because Jesus represents the reason you want to get rid of Jesus, because Jesus represents all the aspects of your life that you don't want to deal with. That's what we were taught. I was taught that shit in catechism. Cover your blood in the sins and they don't exist anymore. So a lot of us, when we come into ourselves, so now you're sitting in that space, everything that you put under, everything that, and you repeated it, because the first, go look up the good ship Jesus. The good ship Jesus was the first boat that carried your ancestors in that space, or your emotions. We got to take it out of the physical space. They carried your emotions or the old aspects of you into the new world. That's the same thing that you're doing. You put all of your issues into this one boat, whether you consciously realize you did it or you consciously realizing you do it. It's even worse when you consciously realize you do it, because that's when you got the people. We don't get into that. But now you put everything into this one boat and you got it pushed out to sea. All your issues and all your problems. Here's the problem with that. That boat got to come back to dock somewhere. It got to dock somewhere. It's going to keep docking somewhere. You creating the docks. Remember, everything you don't deal with, guess what it gets to come ship up on? The ship that you put it out on. So now you sitting in that space. I'm at the point, I remember when I got to the point, I was like, nigga, I can't say fuck Jesus because I am Jesus. If Jesus is the Christos energy, Kundalini rising, all this other shit, then I can't say fuck Jesus. I'm Jesus. Yes. All that, like, you cutting all that nigga got all that damn power, and you saying something about this month. But this is the crazy part. You will gather all this information about one point. We'll say Jesus. But let somebody say something about Harriet Tubman. Let somebody say something about Malcolm X. Let somebody say something about Martin Luther King. Let somebody say something about Martin Luther King. Let somebody say something about Minister Farrakhan. Let somebody say something about them. And you will lose your damn mind. You will lose your mind. It says in the text, it says in the text, and the text can't be taken away, ye are gods. So I'm going to take that one. I'm going to take out of every line out of this book that I'm going to say is not real, and this shit ain't real, but I'm going to take that one line, and I'm going to use that one line to my advantage. In the whole book a lie, but where it says ye are gods, that's the only shit that's true in there. But I have recollection to all the way back to the past when my grandmother's grandmother and grandmother's grandmother and great grandmothers and great ancestors, all great conjure women and brujas, used the fucking book of Psalms. And there's relevance to that using the book of Psalms. And they said they took the saints from the Bible and they put those saints in front of the Bible and they put them in front of the other principles. So I'm going to deny all of that energy. I'm going to deny this. Because that's what you do. That's what you do ultimately. So you stay in this denial concept with yourself. I don't want to remember this. So I put everything I don't remember into a box and I put it over there and I'm not going to use it. But that's the shit that's creating your life. That's the shit that's creating your realm. That's the shit that's creating your environment. That's the shit that's creating your work. Your whole world is based on what you are not dealing with. If it was based on what you were dealing with, then you wouldn't, then what would be the whole purpose of you waking up? If your life was based on what you were doing or the results that you cling to, then what would be the point of you saying that you woke up? What would be the point of you saying that you are aware of something? What would be the point of any of it? What would be the point of you studying your mythos? What would be the point of you doing this work? What would be the point? What would be your point? What would be your point? A lot of us, you get stuck in that narrative, that bloodlusting narrative, like, yeah, I got to fight something. Some of y'all thinking that your ancestors telling y'all to fight some shit. Your ancestors ain't telling you to fight some shit. They're letting you know. Your ancestors are internal inside of you. So if they're acknowledging war, that means there's a war going inside of you. As above, so below, as within, as without. If I set the tone for everything that's in my space, and my space is in conflict, that means I might have some conflicts I need to sit down with. Until I deal with those conflicts, I don't know what's a projection and what's not. I'm just going to feed into everything. I'm going to try to be everywhere. I'm going to try to take residence in all these spaces so I can still maintain the behavior. This is why I'm just trying to be real. I don't like nobody trying to play my face and all of it. You can't play my face. You can't play. They can't play your authenticity. They only can play your traumas. They only can outplay your trauma. They only can outplay all of the traumatic events that you have not dealt with. That's what they can use. If I deal with those aspects, then I have no enemies. Now, anything outside of me that wants to be an enemy is only going to be, all they can do is project on, they can only project things to me. But since I've now realized that I'm not in conflict, I'm at peace, let me build on this rock, I build my church. Or on this rock, I build my new body. And on this rock, I'm going to teach some shit. But you want to go read the book of Thomas where go read the book of Thomas where Jesus says all this should go away too. Now come on these scriptures. Go read the book of Thomas. The other pages that you need in order to understand yourself even some more. You talking about the nigga, he isn't real. Okay. Mickey Mouse isn't real, but you don't say nothing about him. It came from somewhere and became a behavior down here. If you gonna question it all or don't question nothing at all, you want to keep doing the same thing, keep doing the same thing. Let's admit that. Say you want to keep doing the same. Say you want to keep living the same life. Let's say that. Say you want to keep living the same life, doing the same thing, being the same way, acting the same way, same years. Just say that to yourself. Say it. Be real. Be honest with you. Be honest. Say it. Yo, I want to stay the exact fucking same, but you can't, because that would acknowledge the wound. On either end, you got to acknowledge these wounds. So the ones that cling to the external aspect of a narrative, and the reason that you still stuck on this space, I'm still trying to bang and get my people out of bondage. Y'all both in bondage for the same reasons. And it ain't got nothing to do with the external narratives. That's just the filler. That's just the cover. Until y'all both go inside of yourselves, y'all both gonna be doing the same thing, having the same argument. And that's what you're seeing now. This Gemini shift is going to be exposing the aspects of the old twin and the new twin, the rising aspect. Most of the things, one second. This the spectrum that you get stuck in. Panic talked about that duat. You get stuck in between them lines. That lines, that's the last of your duality. That's the last of the duality. Once you get to this point, you can no longer see things as separate. Things must come together. So if you're still operating in the system down low in polarity, stuck in rings, when you come up here to this final point, the Djed pillar, all of these aspects, the point, the Djed pillar, the reason that the death spear was so fucking big and all that shit, the same. Think about this. The death spear or Darth Vader's ship was the same damn planet that Megatron kept trying to bring down all three Transformers. The Death Star, that big ass ship was the same damn plane. Looked like this. It looked just like Cybertron. Hell, Cybertron looked like the Technodrome from the fucking Ninja Turtles. I don't know where that came from, but it came from. I don't know where we was going with that, but that's where it was. The same sphere of expression. The dot. When you look at the Kabbalah, you go to that center, that center circle that you gotta go through. That's that depth. That's the Death Star. That's the Technodrome. That's Cybertron. That's whatever that planet from Halo. That's what that is. You gotta go through that point, and you gotta be like, you know what? This shit can't come with me. Yes, it's going to sting. It's going to challenge you. Guess what it's supposed to do? But think about it like this. Think about you came to this point for a real reason. That nigga, they got hit. Them niggas didn't make it. Everybody has a role to play down here. Some motherfuckers' role is to play to be the background. That means they're the epitome of your behaviors. It don't matter what you do, no matter what you say, no matter how you act, no matter how many examples and figures you put up, they meant to play the background. Others are down here, they got lessons they gotta learn. They got heavy lessons they gotta learn. Other motherfuckers, similar like me, I came back, I was like, oh my God, why I gotta go down there and do this shit? All right, cool, whatever. Chose to come down here in the physical form of to be able to speak. All of the deaths in the transitions, whether it's happening to your life, all of the deaths and transitions that if you've experienced, that you have seen, them niggas' soul contracts were done. They did their job. Paul Mooney, nigga, did his job. Prince did his job. DMX did his job. They did exactly what they were supposed to do and got out. Had no fear in their mind. I remember listening to a damn, what the hell was that nigga name? Humpty Hump. I forgot the nigga real name. It was just on the tip of my tongue. That nigga said he had a conversation with Pac. Pac was not scared to die. You're going to have to get to a point where you scared of your own power. Your power is in your death. Until you take on this role of you going through your death, you can't get into the real attributes. What's that line? Through the eye of a needle? Or the doorway of Darth? Been written in front of, I don't want to do that. Man, all right, keep going. You keep doing what you're doing. Because the desperation, the guilt, yeah, Sot G. Oh, the desperation, the trying to hold on, trying to maintain their identity. But I wanted to be the best ever. You still can be the best, whatever you're trying to be, but it's not going to be through the spectrum of the sphere, what you are trying to do it through. You're meant for something greater. That's why it didn't work all those times. Accept it. I did accept those aspects because now I understand. Like, oh, that's why I didn't do it. That's why it didn't work. That's why this didn't happen. And you're going to be able to go down the line, similar to when you yell, similar to when you can't, similar to your story that you own. When you look at the universal laws and you've applied all of the universal laws, it's synonymous to you being able to recite every law of my yacht and say that I am none of these things. That was my human body. That was me learning some shit. I'm no longer those things. Because that's the acceptance for yourself. Because a lot of you don't want to accept the shit that you did. Because if you really accepted what you did, you can tell that part of the story. You can accept what you did. You can tell that part of the story. That's part of the story need to be told. You keep avoiding that one crucial part of your story. You hung up on that one part of your story. And that one part of your story keeps creating everything that's inside of your space. Those 1, 2, 3, no matter how many, I don't know how many things in the general sense that you ain't dealt with, but those are the things creating your life. Those are the things giving your life. Those are the things giving your now existence. I listened to the State of the Black Union video the other day. And as I'm listening to it, yeah, I was listening to. I've been listening to like a lot of speeches and different interviews with like the Black Caucus and the Black leaders, and I'm listening to the interviews. And now, when I listen to the interview, I'm like, they're not saying anything. They know how to say things to make motherfuckers like they know how to make people feel good in the things that they're saying in the space, so niggas will rally around feeling good. But when it comes to that feel better part, the feel better part is direct in your face. The feel better part is when your grandmother told your ass to go outside and go get that switch. The feel better part is when your granddaddy was teaching you, or you were being taught something and you had to learn stuff. That's the feel better part. That's that feel better part. But we hid those aspects away, and when we kept repeating, now you repeating those aspects. That same disciplinary tone. Which disciplinary tone are you listening to? Which one are you reacting out in? Using it as an example. They know how to use them. They love using emotional taglines to keep you gripped on. So now you're looking at the conversations in your life. Conversations change. Most of the things that you get attracted to in gossip, it's emotional taglines. the shit that you get attracted to in the movie, the shit that you'll remember more in the movie until you actually come into a new sense of yourself, the emotional tagline. You remember that, you remember that line from the movie. You don't remember shit else about that movie, but you remember that one line. You looking for the emotional taglines. You're looking for a reason to react inside of the speech. If you don't see a reason to react, you don't know how to respond. I don't know what the fuck to do now. I don't know what to say or do or how to act. I don't know how to feel. Because you were looking for the emotional tagline. You were like, tag, I'm gonna use that. Leapfrog. You tried to leapfrog into the conversation. But now you go into a conversation where you ain't got no leapfrog, you ain't got no intellectual floor, you ain't got nothing to tether to. What you gonna do now? That's where you at now. When you come into your awareness, that's what your awareness is doing. That's what your coming online is doing. That's what that enlightenment is doing. That's what that violet light is doing. It's burning away everything that can leave you attached. It's highlighting everything that leaves you attached. One of the deepest aspects about shadow work, and one of the things that I tell everybody that I give shadow work exercises to, we do their work. You got to be ready for your shadow work for real. You have to come to a space, because that's why I said Wednesday, the key to your shadow work is integrity and humility. You got to be ready to go into that space, because if you're not ready, you're going to go into that space lit up like a fucking Christmas tree and wondering why everything's attacking you at once, because you weren't ready. You went in there with expectancy. Ooh, I remember that. I didn't even watch the movie Crash, but I remember everybody at school the next day was talking about the movie Crash and the little girl, and then Terrence Howard's wife getting felt up and all of these things. And I was like, ooh, that movie sounds pretty good. I might want to watch. I still haven't seen, but yeah, like that's how you get physically attached into this shit. They leave you on taglines. The hashtag is what promotes your shit in your space. You live in hashtags. Hashtag relationship goals. Hashtag mom of the year. Hashtag husband of the year. Hashtag I wish my husband would do this. And then you feed into that narrative. You fed into that narrative of you got to be crazy. If I don't drive you, if you're not crazy in dealing with me, then you got stuck in a narrative that was a trauma response. I'm at peace. I maintain my peace. Therefore, anything that does not maintain my peace, I'm going to check it. I'm going to question it. Why are we not in a peaceful state? What is really wrong? What is the problem? Because we've learned how to react based on the emotional. So if I don't say it, I don't act on it. If I don't say it through an emotional response, or it's not given to me on an emotional response, then everything's all right. I keep going forward. Because that's all you just masking your shit behind the projection. But it needs to feed. So if you're not getting it in that space, guess what you're going to do? You're going to have other things outside of you to feed that behavior. That's the role of the niggas in the back are supposed to be playing the background. Everybody has a role. Everybody got a purpose. Most of the people that are in your life at this point in time, they're meant to play the background. That's what their background noise. Oh my God. Wow. I didn't even know that. Father's Day falls on Gay Pride weekend. Whoa. That is some. I didn't even know that. The more you know. And it's like shit like when you notice shit like that, you're like, nigga, they want me to react. They want me. Why do they want me to be? Oh yeah, because they can't feed on my emotion in pure form. They can't feed on my shit in pure form. They can't feed on your shit in pure form. When you in when you think about it like this, when you're in optimum operating condition, that means you went to bed on time and then you woke up and you had a program, you set your day. Can't shit really stop you. Can't shit really stop you. Some things might come up and like you can reflect on them later, but shit really can't stop you. It's only when you stuck in an emotional imbalance that shit can get to you. Niggas go, everything gonna be bad when you wake up in a bad mood. Is it really that shit, or is it just because you went undisciplined, you didn't check your emotions? Maybe you needed to meditate for 15 minutes when you woke up in that badass mood. Stop trying to escape shit. A lot of times we put ourselves into that space where we're trying to escape things. You escape it, escapism, coping, that hope narrative, that staying in that space, you always gonna find that you always gonna get snagged up on some shit. It don't matter how fast you run if you don't know how to maneuver. It don't matter how slick it don't matter how slick your mouth and how slick that you can talk if you're not really saying anything. It don't matter. It don't matter how fast you run if you don't know how to maneuver. Because sometimes it might be time for your ass to slow down. You just used to running all the time. That's a trauma response. Always feeling like you got to be somewhere is a trauma response. Always feeling like you got to be involved in everything, that is a trauma response. That is a trauma response. Always feeling like you got to be over here, over there, doing this, doing that, helping this, knocking that out, doing that over there, doing that. That's a trauma response because you're not giving yourself a chance to reflect. Anything that takes you away from the chance of reflecting, it's a reactionary point. That's why every time, similar to that shit I just found out about Father's Day being on a gay pride weekend, that's going to be a point. Now you going to have niggas coming up out of nowhere talking about like, yo, they trying to manipulate. Nigga, that shit's done. It's already happened. You just emotionally respond. It's already happened. You already got niggas wearing fingernail polish. That was already happened. You already got niggas wearing wigs to try to get views on Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. That shit's already happened. What you're responding to is to keep the energy in that space. That's why it was put there. Let me put that right there. Let's see how you react to this. It's like you literally are sitting in you're sitting in your own head saying, I'm gonna put this here, I'm gonna put this here based on this, based on this. Because it only can pull from what is already present. It only pulls from what's already present. If it ain't there, I can't pull it from nowhere. I'm going to pull it out of thin air. No, it's already there. It was already there. You mad about pedophiles and niggas ended up missing, chicks end up missing. Where your inner child at? Where's your inner child right now? Women end up missing, women trying to do all this extra shit. You got to put all this extra shit on yourself instead of looking at your real self. Then you want to blame, then because niggas don't want no real woman and they don't understand what a real woman is. Have you defined what the real aspect is? It's not based on feminine, it's not based on masculine. Male is not masculine and feminine is not woman. That is the energy inside of you. That's the energy inside of me, you, everybody else. You got the masculine archetype inside of you, you got the feminine archetype inside of you. Your unseen and undealt with feminine wounds, and your unseen and undealt with masculine wounds, and if you go into you split in a space, and now somebody else is split inside that space, and you're used to someone catering to these wounds, not helping you heal them, but cater them. And there's someone over here catering to these wounds, so y'all catering to each other's wounds. So now it becomes too much. I can't handle this over emotional ass nigga. I can't deal with this under emotional ass bitch. Guess what you gonna do? Escape to go get something else? And that's what the new culture is. The longer you don't deal with it, the more that it starts to submit. Remember, your emotional timeline is cemented by your behavior, i.e., your reaction. So as long as I keep reacting to it, it just keeps cementing in those timelines. So now when I look at it, I'm more disgusted. So now I got more of a reason to avoid learning my lesson. That's all you keep doing every time you keep putting it off. Every time you keep putting it off till tomorrow, you just setting it up for, okay, cool. Everything that's about to come by right behind that is going to sit on top of that. So now this shit nigga, I don't know what the fuck that shit is. That ain't me. Yeah, it is. That's you from a behavioral standpoint. That's you from the behavioral standpoint. You upset. Why? What are you really mad at? What are you really upset with? Here's a nice little fun fact. The scene, what you see in that aspect, the scene aspect comes from the womb or the masculine aspect, the feminine aspect, or is nurtured. So the emotional aspects that nurture it into that feminine aspect. So a lot of times when I'm just being a woman, that's the masculine aspect you're trying to show. You sitting there every single day falling into ego traps or emotional traps. Shorty up there showing her ass on fucking screen. That's the masculine energy. That's the masculine shit. That's a masculine. That's masculine. That ain't feminine. You're not showing your feminine aspect. When you solely depend on, I'm gonna put my booty on this screen and sit on this I'm gonna go sit on the counter and sit up and hike my booty up on the counter. You are acknowledging something. Knowledge is the masculine archetype. So you acting out in your masculine. And then you want someone to treat you in a feminine aspect, and you think feminine is no. I have nails. I have hair. All this shit grows and is nurtured by my energy anyway. My knowledge helps me guide in how I nurture my energy into the space. I'm outside of that. I'm not splitting shit up anymore. You gonna get to that point where you start splitting shit up anymore. When you using those trauma responses, when you using your traumatic wounds, like the feminine wounds and the masculine wounds, and when you go into a session with me, we assess those wounds. We assess these wounds. A lot of us will act the way we have came into this space now. Everything's been flipped, so it's like you're acting in the feminine aspect or the nurturing aspect. So like when you're talking about, I nurture my niggas and all of this shit, I nurture, my niggas ride with me, I buy them drinks and all this food and shit. You are in the feminine wound. You're in the feminine, you are activating through your feminine wounds. So when you are in the feminine sense, you're talking about all my girls is around me and you're acting in your masculine wounds. You see how you switch the shit up? When niggas is emotional around their brothers and this my homies right here, man. I love you, man. You're in your feminine wounds. When you're having that conversation with your homegirls and y'all talking about, that's why I don't like it, you're in your masculine wounds. You're activating in your masculine wounds. Where did you learn that? Where did that come from? You have to deal with that wound. If you ain't dealing with it, you're gonna keep repeating the same shit. I talked about that shit when I talked about that ride or die mentality. Every time you got to accept everything that go with that. You got to accept everything that go with that. I remember having motherfuckers around me talking about, yo, I'm going to ride for you. I ride for my niggas, da, 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 da. And I was like, what they were actually doing when I didn't pay attention to it was it gave them a reason to be accepted for them always being fucked up all the time. Them niggas got shit they got to deal with. They ain't dealing with their lives. And I remember we'd be sitting there. It would always be me, and understanding that's why now I'm a healer and I do counseling, I do therapy, because they sitting there with me with like having whole heart to hearts with me. I'm like, why are you crying, my nigga, to me? And I didn't understand why. I was like, why are you crying to me? Yo, man, like I act this way around a lot of people, but like, yo, every time like me and you having them one-on-one conversations is like, it's always different. Like you make me think some different shit. I'll be like, and at that point, this is like 8 years ago, I'll be like, yeah, cool. I didn't know how to take it. Therefore, for me, I still had some masculine wounds I had to deal with. They were my feminine wounds. I had some feminine wounds I had to deal with because I didn't know how to take this information in and nurture it. I was trying to look for an answer instead of react, instead of learn how to respond. So now 9 times out of 10, if you send me a message and you say something to me, that's why I'm always going to say much gratitude because there's nothing really else I got to say outside of it. I'm not going to look for a story to add to it, not unless we're in a space where we're doing that aspect. But it's always going to be much gratitude because I'm in true gratitude for you saying that you learned something from the space. So that was my intent. That's your intent, that you and your true intentions of yourself. When you act in your true intent and you're outside of the you didn't do this or this didn't happen or I was suspecting this, I needed this to happen, I needed this to happen, everybody did this and you did that. You are acting in an emotional wound. You're acting in an emotional wound. For you to sit there and get upset or feel some type of way, it's acknowledging your wound. That's why it happened. The spirit said, oh, you said that you're this, this, and this. Let's see how love is a destructive energy. Love is a destructive energy first. It destroys all catalysts and all shadows. Love bring you into a position where you really looking at yourself in the mirror like, damn, I really need to look at myself. I'm like, man, why are you having this conversation with me? But now I understand why they was having this conversation with me. I'm like, oh, it's in wound. Most of the niggas that I was around at the fucking time, they didn't have fathers. So they were like, when they get into that high emotional state, it naturally comes out. It's naturally supposed to come out. The thing that fucks us up all the time is we don't know how to respond. We thought vulnerability was a weakness. That's the strength. We have to turn all of that shit the other way. We got to be able to set that. What we thought we were setting boundaries, you're actually setting parameters. You're only setting up barriers and walls and compartmentalizing everything. Like the most simplest thought process of how long can you blame everything on being something else when you get to the information that's only been here for a certain amount of time? Like when I said last week, when I talked about you only been a Negro or black for 157 years. You only been black for 157 years. What were you before that? That opened up the floodgates to everything else. The white man's the devil. That nigga's only been here for 2,000 plus years. What was there before that? They just came up on the polarity of the timeline that the shit slowed down. The next time you have a conversation with somebody, The next time you have a conversation with somebody, I want you to administer the scientific program of Papa Lucifer. I just thought about it. The next time you have a conversation with somebody, I really want you to look at the conversation and simply sit there and do not say anything. Do not say anything the next time you have a conversation with somebody. The next time you have a conversation with somebody, don't say shit. Don't say nothing. Just sit there. Nod, say yes. Show that you're engaged to the conversation and just sit there. Don't try to, you're going to fight trying to find something to connect to the story with. Fight it. I want you to fight it. I want you to see how long you can sit there in that conversation doing that. It might be 1 minute. It might be 2 minutes. It might be 15 minutes. It might be 45 minutes. Don't know. But do that. Do that test to yourself. After a while, you're just going to be sitting there like, you're going to notice something in the conversation. And I've noticed this in many conversations. The conversation is going to go from a current event or an anchor. Every conversation is a current event or an anchor. And then that anchor leads into the emotional taglines. And after the emotional taglines is a current event. And after the current event, then the true emotion comes out in the conversation. How do you combat that? You got to get to a point inside of yourself where you are avoiding getting hung up on the emotional taglines inside of yourself. So, good exercise for you having a conversation with yourself. How many conversations can you say you have with yourself when you get to the why? When you get to the true aspects of the why with yourself. That means you're sitting there in that conversation and you get to the point of the truth of the matter of why you are at where you are at in your life. Why you are at. You get to the point of accountability. Usually we get to that point of accountability in our conversation. Mm-hmm. You're always in the right position. What you about to learn. Take that conversation with yourself. You get to that point to where the whys are at. That means you get to I'm going to use a random conversation I used to have with myself. Like, why am I always tired? And then I got to that point, I was like, I could work out more. I do need to start eating differently. I started getting into the shows. And then I was like, but why do I not seem to work out? And then right there at that point, my ego grabbed hold and pulled me right back out. Was like, nigga, you ain't got time to work out. You got to do you got this, and this. So the key is, and it's one of the things we do in the session, we gonna break that wall that stops you from asking and answering your whys. You're going to break this little one right here that stops you from getting into that why. It's all in how you set yourself up into that space. It's all based in that womb where it came from. It's all, you like, yeah, man, I keep having that same conversation, but it never seems to get nowhere. And then, since that conversation with yourself don't get nowhere, every other conversation that you have don't get nowhere. Because you're looking for the tagline. You're looking for that tag. Ooh, I'm going to use this point. I'm going to use this point. I'm going to use this thought process. I'm going to use this act. I remember back in 1996, this happened. 2008, you did this. In 1956, they did this and they did this. So now you just start regurgitating. Because that's the same conversation you have with yourself. Yes, you gotta answer your why. You gotta be honest with yourself. I remember answering the whys for myself First time, it sounded like I was going fucking crazy. I legit was going crazy. Now I have normal conversations with myself every single day. I set up time for me to have a conversation with myself. It's usually after listening to myself through meditation, while I'm working out, have a nice little conversation with myself. I set myself up to have a conversation with myself. The beginning conversations were really shaky because I got a little emotional, teared up, cried, upset with myself, mad and all that shit, feeling all the emotions. But then I started answering those whys. Los, you know where you got that shit from. Lucy, you know how that shit happened. But why? But why did it happen? Why am I looking? Closure is a trap. 90% of the shit that you looking for closure is a trap. You're looking for closure, i.e. an emotional tagline to tie it up in a nice little bow. You're looking for somebody to say they were scared so you can maintain your scared behavior. You're looking for somebody to be mad so you can maintain the behavior that you use in reacting to somebody being mad. But if you go to somebody that's in true peace, you go to somebody that's in peace with themselves, you ain't gonna get those taglines. And now in that space, as you coming to me and we going into a reflective point, you ain't getting no emotional taglines for me. And then we're gonna start seeing. Then now the projections start to come out. Now your conversation, you like, well, I did say I had this whole conversation with myself based. I hyped myself up based on fear. Remember, there's only those two emotions, love and fear. Everything else is a behavioral aspect of those 2 points. So how many conversations did you have that were based on fear? You thought about losing something, you were thinking about fear. Hell, if you were thinking about winning something, you still were in fear. That's the polarity. To love is not to think about love. To love is to honor and understand that you're going to lose and learn, you're going to win and learn. Whether or not. If I lose, I'm about to learn some shit. If I win, there's something in that win that I had to lose in order to win. There's something that I had to let go of in order to win. You can come together now. Now you're like, nigga, I'm not thinking about winning or losing anything. Then now, as that happens, now the shedding process can begin itself naturally. You can't force yourself to shed. You can't force yourself to shed. Because there's key nutrients and aspects in that space that you still got to learn. You can't force yourself to come up out of that cocoon. You can't force yourself to come up out of that shell. You got to allow that shit to naturally fall away by itself. And that's by acknowledging everything all the sticky shit that's inside of that. Or else you're going to carry it with you forward. Now you can't fly. Now you hobbling. Now I can't get to where the fuck I need to get to. Why? You still got something you got to deal with. It don't matter what I'm inside of. Okay, cool. That's nice. You still mad at Jesus? All right, cool. You got to deal with something. What about Jesus don't you like? What narrative is in your fuck Jesus story? Is it because your mom gave all her problems to Jesus and won't acknowledge them shits anymore? So you're looking for closure on that? Is it because your pops did what he did and then gave his life to Jesus and now you ain't supposed to talk about it no more? It's because your uncle. What happened? What is in your fuck Jesus story? What's in it? Let's deal with it. You don't like something because you don't know why you don't even like it. You just say you don't like it because no one else liked it in the family. That narrative is done. That old paradigm is done. That's the old God. That's the old God or the external narrative of the gods to stay within play. When we think about the old paradigm, the old gods, you worshiping or you setting up the self, and you haven't become that. That is the same narrative. That is the first level of you in that mystery school before you say, hold up, wait. Why am I attracted to this spirit, this entity, this energy? What is it about me? Every spirit, every energy has a lower aspect and a higher aspect. You're going to the higher aspects. I've talked about this before. The lower aspects are the aspects that are against humanity, destroying your humanity, getting yourself in check, destroying these masculine identities. The higher aspects are of the whole or the androgynous bonding of them going into that space. So if you still think there's an agenda against the black man, you got some work to do. The only agenda is the one that you subsequently put yourself into. But they showed us on TV that they did the war on drugs and crack and all of these things. They took the black man out the household. There's a whole entire statistic report speaking on when they did the survey with the food stamps and all of the all the food stamps, the welfare and those checks, when they asked those women, all right, do you still want to keep getting this or what? And most of the women said, I'm gonna keep getting this. I'm gonna keep getting the assistance. I don't have to think about it. I can forget some shit. And you've been carrying on that same narrative your entire life. Stimmies, all that shit, you carrying on that the same entire life. The niggas getting PPP loans right now and don't have businesses, don't understand nothing about business. When I read the guidelines about the business, I remember the first time I went for a PPP loan, I got upset. But I didn't start my business at the date that it was set. But then I read the parameter. But it forced me, because I was always in the study off all around. I read the parameters of the PPP loan. Most of them motherfuckers don't understand that when you got a business, you pay taxes quarterly. You don't pay them shits at the end of the year like everybody else. You do it at the end, but you pay that shit quarterly. So when they put up that paperwork and you like, after this, do fine lines and fine print niggas weren't reading, guess what, nigga? You will be audited before you even get to the point to where you can say, okay, cool, and build anything up. So did you really get over on somebody? No. It's already set up. You're going to blame it on, then it's going to give you the same cycle of narrative. Yeah. You got an issue underlining with yourself. You got to deal with your issue. But them niggas, now motherfuckers gonna start getting, man, what's an audit? Why they auditing me? Nigga, you got a paycheck protection loan. Payroll protection. That means if you had employees, you paid your employees, you took care of certain business aspects. Your dumb ass went and got a car. You went and did all this other stuff when you could have easily, all that child support you were paying, you could have put your kids on the payroll. You could have put your baby mother on the payroll. Could have put your baby mother on the payroll. Could have put the kids on the payroll. And then wrote all them checks off. But in your mind, you were like, I'm not giving my baby mother nothing, because you still thinking from an emotional standpoint. Because you still think about the time when your dad gave your mom everything and she left, or your mom gave your dad everything and he left. You still feeding off of that shit. You have to get to a point to where you got to start taking this responsibility for yourself. You got to get to a point to where it's like, it's time for me to sit down with myself and really have that conversation. If I don't know how to have that conversation, it's time for me to actually go, let me go sit down with somebody that knows how to have these conversations. Let me go sit down with somebody that really know how to do that shit. Let me read. I experienced a lot of suicidal thoughts, but I had the epiphany. Maybe my thoughts aren't literal. Those are the kind of thoughts that are synonymous with the dark of the night of soul. Yes. Yes, I'm glad that she said, if you have them suicidal thoughts, don't take them literally. In that case, when it's the dark night of the soul, really look at the point of that thought, like where you at with that thought, like when you had the thought, what was that thought surrounded, or what was that thought around? What built around that thought? It's 9 times out of 10, most of the suicidal thoughts that you have, they're conflicts of the identities that you created that you're not dealing with. They're conflicts of things that you have not dealt with yet. That's where it comes to a point to where it's like, I have to end this, I have to end this thought, I have to end this thought. Your mind naturally, based in the human cycle, you're going to be thinking, because a lot of the things that we look, like, 1 second. About what I'm saying. A lot of the thought process, like suicidal thoughts, the things that have been written off as like disorders and these disorders and things, and we get deep into those things in session. It's not necessarily like, oh my God, I'm having thoughts about killing myself. I need to go get help and I need to go get fixed. Something's wrong with me. Nothing's wrong with you. Having suicidal thoughts is your way of your subconscious telling you that it's time to eject something out of our life. It's time to acknowledge this emotional aspect, acknowledge this behavior, acknowledge something has to die. We're carrying on too many things. We're trying to carry on too many things into this new space, and they're not meant to go there. That's what a suicidal thought is, especially when it comes to your dark night of the soul. Did that whole lecture on the dark night of the soul. Everything that you used to, like the most main part when you're coming into your spaces, you're starting to see that certain things that you did, you don't even know why the fuck you did. You're like, man, I don't know why I was doing that in my life. I don't know why this happened. I don't know why I was doing this. I was wilding out. And you starting to accept those things. Bringing it to the surface. They come into the surface. So, and sometimes, yes, they do come up to your mind as a suicidal thought. You be like, man, I had a thought about killing myself 3 times today. One of the things that I do in a session, we get to a point, I tell people, like, it's time for you to write your one of my exercises, and one of the exercises that I administer in a lot of sessions and give out is writing a suicide note, writing a series of suicide notes. Writing your suicide, it's the process of how we get through the dark night of the soul. Writing out the suicide note, writing out your obituary, doing everything that is into the presumed aspects of the death. The suicide note, the note to your mother, the note to your father, the note to your brother, your sister, the notes to all of these people, and you are detailing in this note everything that you have learned and everything that you appreciate and what the things that you are in gratitude in. All of these got me to this point. Now at this time, it's time for me to close my eyes forever. You write the note. You're not giving the note to people. This whole thing. It's not like you writing this note and giving it to, but you're writing this note as if you are writing to them. You're writing to them, and you're writing with the pencil, and you're writing it down, all of these thoughts. And after a while, this is a part of scribing, your mind's going to go into automatic transmission, and it's going to write down shit you ain't never even thought about. Everything's going to start coming to the surface. Every unhealed aspect, things that have not been dealt with, the thoughts, everything's going to come up in that letter. When I put you under, you're going to start writing you're going to write everything out. I teach you how to get into that position. You're going to write everything out. Now you read this letter to yourself, you seal it, and then you burn it. Now you're symbolizing that you're now released from all of these things. That's why you wrote it in pencil. You read it to yourself. And now it's time for me to burn this letter and burn these things away. That's the suicidal thoughts. Thinking about your suicide. Oh my God, I keep having. Don't take them literal. Just like when you go into a dream, I've had people come to me and interpret their dream like I was eating onion rings inside of my dream. Onion rings, frozen onion rings means stagnant. Anything, whenever you have a dream about something that's frozen, that means there's something stagnant in your life that you got to deal with. Everything has a meaning. You just got to be able to sit there with it. Just sit there with it. Sit there with yourself. Learn yourself. It's time. Everything you're doing now is learning yourself. But yeah, that's very synonymous with that dark night of the soul. What was I doing? Yeah. Anybody else got questions? We got questions. I like to grab mine. Deck of all decks. Also in the dark night of the soul, one of the biggest things in the dark night of the soul, some people are still stuck in their dark night of the soul because you don't want to deal with it. Everything, as we're saying this, those urges, learning those urges, it's a difference between suffering just to stay relevant and for the attention and actually learning how to use it and learning how to sacrifice, learning how to sacrifice the physical aspect in order to take it to the higher aspect of yourself. Someone asked, brother asked me the other day about semen retention. He was like, yo, I was doing good at my semen retention, but then like this shit came through and we were talking and she made me feel some type of way and I didn't know how to react to it and it ended up falling off. I was like, you were doing your semen retention. You weren't doing it to the highest extent. When you're doing these practices, semen retention, celibacy, all of these aspects, you're doing these as points to cultivate power within yourself. You're not doing it. You can be celibate for 4 years, but if you are doing anything with that energy or to that aspect of those thoughts, like you just ignoring these thoughts, yes, it's going to get very, very hard. It's going to get very, very hard because you're literally not doing anything with the thought. The thought lays stagnant. Yeah, like you gonna go through the process because it has to come out. It's like it's coming out like, oh, around this stuff. Oh, that makes sense. You're not avoiding these things. You're learning how to use these things in the higher up to. I remember my first training of like semen retention and celibacy. That shit lasted for 3 years. The first year was the most horriblest thing because the first year, everything that could have distracted me tried to distract me, came into my space. It was like it's like being in a relationship and now everything want to come out. Once you learn this relationship with yourself, everything wants to come out and try to distract you and say you don't need to do it. But until you don't know what it is without it, you really don't know. You really can't understand and tap into yourself. So like going through the celibacy process, first year is crazy because it was just based on I was just ignoring and avoiding. Second year, I started to understand. I was like, it's not about avoiding the thought. And around the second year, that's when I read the way of the Superior Man. I was like, it's not about avoiding these thoughts. Me avoiding this thought is acknowledging that I have a shame. I feel shameful for thinking about it or guilty for thinking about it or anything of that nature. Now it gave me to the point I was like, what does that thought mean? What does that fat ass mean to me? What do those titties mean to me? Defining what it meant to me. So after I got through the process, now it's like I'm not thinking based on a bias. I don't have to create a reason why not to. Like I don't have to submit to a lower thought process of like, she probably this or she probably that. Like there's a whole video, like I watched the whole video yesterday And the chick was like, she really convinced herself based on her own insecurities that the dude liked white men, like white girls. So she wasn't his type. The nigga that's standing there existing walked by. She had this whole dialogue inside of her mind to keep her from not exploring the thought into going into depth. You got to stop putting yourself in a position where you're not exploring that thought into depth. This is you becoming androgynous. This is you becoming one with your thoughts. You're ran by your emotions, or you're either in control or you're not in control. I can go to everywhere from the gym to grocery stores to everywhere, and the same fucking reaction. There's no need for me to react to it. Like, she has on some nice leggings. Okay, cool. Go about my business. There's no, oh my God, I feel bad for looking at it. Because when you deny it, when you deny yourself to indulge and deny that adult indulgence and learning how to indulge, you can't create the scenario inside of your mind. Because now you feel bad for doing it. All it's doing is showing you that you got some guilt you got to deal. You got some guilt issues. You got some insecurity issues. You got some issues you ain't going to deal with. Maybe some of y'all is upset at the last man that you had left you for a chick that had no ass, and you thought your ass was everything. So now you started questioning your ass. But then that goes further back to, why did your dad leave your mother? Why didn't your dad and mom get married? All of these aspects. That's the layers that we have to get through in order to come in at your release. Because until then, you're always going to try to find a subsequent aspect to keep you living inside of that urge, stuck within time or behavior, instead of really building inside of yourself the true internal worth. Maybe I do need to learn how to do, maybe the way that I thought that it was supposed to work wasn't going to work. Maybe there's a reason that it's not working. You got to change that whole thought process. You got to change we're changing from reaction to response. We're changing from reaction to response. When you're stuck in reaction, you can do so. I'll put it like this. You can do something. You want to go manifest something, say your affirmations and speak that shit you spoke that shit to the heavens. Spoke it to the heavens. But the things that are going to stop you from getting to that point are the first things that come up. The things you have not dealt with, the things you ain't had that conversation with yourself with. Every single time. I've asked this question before. Why don't you have $1 million? Most people, I remember I asked myself that question. Why don't I have $1 million? I was like, nigga, I don't know what $1 million is. Outside of the external aspects of what I see what $1 million can do, I didn't know what $1 million was. $1 million is only half. Remember, I use my Harlem upbringing and say that you don't have $1 million till you have $2 million. So $1 million is only $500,000 until I have created the stream of cash flow to create and build and grow from the extra $500,000. So I have $1 million in the account, but $500,000 of that money in that account is used to create cash flow and streams. So I don't have $1 million until that $5,000 that I have in that account brings me in $2 million. Cash flow. That's cash flow. That's the same thing with your emotions. I cannot be happy. I cannot find happiness until I'm happy with myself. That means my happiness, when I invest it into a space, brings me more happiness. And the happiness comes from whether the motherfuckers in that space were not happy. Okay, it shows me that them niggas are not happy. I can't be around them. That means I got to stop investing in things that are not matching my happiness. They're not matching my peace. They're not That's the learning. That's the learning aspect. You learn that synonymous key, everything else becomes easy as fuck. You got to get rid of that bloodlust. You got to get rid of that lust to try to be accepted and relevance. You're not doing none of your shit to stay relevant. That's your growth. That's the process. That's the period of time when you changing yourself. You evolving. It's time for you to evolve. Get your shit together. It's time for you to sit there with yourself, have that conversation, be like, you know what? I really need to start working on myself. I really need to start sitting down with myself a couple hours out the day and doing the work that I need to do. That's the key. Until then, you're only going to keep repeating the same thing. You got 30 days. What you going to do with the next 30 days? I challenge you. So what you going to do the next 30 days? You don't keep doing shit on the surface. You actually going to tap into yourself. What you ready for? You know, I'm available. We set that appointment up. We have that talk. We start building that up. We changing. We are automatically. It's time to evolve. It's time to change. It's time to shift. It's time to become the best version of yourself. That's what it's time for. This Gemini energy that's coming through is going to show that split to that aspect. What you want to be. Now I'm all itchy and shit. All right, cool, we good. Yes, but I want you to be the best. I desire you to be the best. I desire you to tap into that best version of yourself, and it's time to. That's why you're here. You're in the right position. What you going to do with it? You got the opportunity. It's your space. What you about to do with it? It's time to stop trying to hold on to what can be, or the what ifs, or the maybes, or you're willing to suffer just in case. And it's time for you to be like, you know what? It's time for me to do. It's time for me to really do this. It's time for me to accept and grow. It's time for me to step into this the grown-up role. I appreciate y'all for stopping through. If you have questions, any questions, comments, you have questions, hit me up in the DM, hit me up in the inbox, hit me up in the DM on Papa Lucy, Papa_Lucy666. Hit me up in the inbox at Rod Colonijas. Hit me at setcolonijas@gmail.com. And let's get it started. I desire you to be the best. I want you to be the best. Keep being the best. I appreciate y'all coming through, catching the lesson, show that love. Some of y'all need to get out of the other light so you can understand that peace in the dark. I love you. We love us. Ashe.